Hey folks, Mark Levin here. Now, before we dive into today's episode, I want to talk about something truly valuable, protecting your financial future with gold. It's called diversification. Now, for that, I only trust Advantage Gold. They're the real deal with 5-star service and a sterling reputation. So give them a call today. Call Advantage Gold at 800-900-8000. Tell them Mark Levin sent you. Trust me, you'll thank yourself in the future. Now let's get to the show. Results may vary. Consult with your financial professional.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. We have to squeeze a 10-hour program into 3 hours. But I am a quasi-professional. I can pull this off, you know. First, this trial in Manhattan. You hear all the legal analysts. Your trial in Manhattan. So I got to thinking, watching this, or watching people reporting on it, commenting on it. Many of them say the same thing, and they say it brilliantly. And the vast majority of them are right. And I'm talking about Fox. Forget about CNN and MSNBC. They're a joke. But I got to thinking, as I tend to, as I'm reading 2 books at the same time, Mr. Producer. I've got one on my lap. I've got one on the end table, and I'm watching the reporters on Fox as I'm preparing for the program. This is such a debacle, this case. It is such a humiliation to the justice system. It is such a grotesque miscarriage of justice being executed by a judge, by the government through their prosecutors, that if there are any persuadable Supreme Court justices in the immunity case, they have to watch this. And they have to compare it to the arguments that were made by Jack Smith's boy, his lawyer, by the Department of Justice, and scratch their heads and say, if we don't figure out how to put this back in a box, we will destroy the judicial system. The judicial system will become the most political system in our country. The electoral process will be utterly unpredictable and subject to district attorneys and attorneys general and so forth tampering with it by using the judicial system. And we on the Supreme Court, there's going to be a never-ending conga line of cases that are brought to us on an emergency appeal basis. Do we really want to subject a judicial system that's been pretty good, not perfect, pretty good, over the course of the history of this republic, to the destruction that awaits it, that can consume it if this isn't stopped. I'm talking about the immunity case. Now, some of you out there, lawyers and non-lawyers who are really sharp, you're thinking, okay, look, wait. The immunity case has to deal with actions taken when a president's president, and then after he leaves the presidency, those actions are used perhaps in a criminal case against him, as they're trying to do with Trump. That's true. 100%. But the justices have to be thinking, okay, look, we had an argument here by the Biden administration with their lawyer, the Jack Smith lawyer, and he argued specifically that we have to trust prosecutors not to abuse the system. After all, they're public officials. They take an oath. They believe in a public trust. They won't politicize the process. They won't do it. That's what he argued. On top of that, when you take the Bragg case, what a prosecutor is doing in that case, and what a judge is doing in that case, and the thousands and thousands of district attorneys and assistant district attorneys and county prosecutors in this country, not to mention the 93 U.S. attorneys' offices overseen by a Department of Justice, and the ability to appoint special counsel, this thing can get way out of hand very fast. It already has. The justices have to look at the entire horizon here of what's going on in Manhattan, what's going on in Georgia, what Jack Smith has brought to this court, the same Jack Smith who was rejected by this court a decade or so ago in the Bob McDonnell case involving Virginia and the governor there and how he destroyed him, only to be reversed 8-0 by twisting the law. And Jack Smith's back. He's twisting the law again. He's demanding cutting corners on appeals. He's demanding that the Speedy Trial Act apply to the government, not to the defendant. He's using every dirty trick in the book. And the court has to decide, the Supreme Court, are we going to allow Jack Smith, Alvin Bragg, Fani Willis, those three, are we going to allow them to change the entire nature of our republic? The whole notion of separation of powers, the poisonous, cancerous destruction of our justice system, because of these three individuals, these three, are we going to allow the court system, particularly the federal court system, and the Supreme Court to be dragged into every one of these disputes that are going to be critical? A presidential race, a Senate race, a governor's race, who knows? Now that we've criminalized the election process, now that we have criminalized the entire justice system, now that we've allowed prosecutors to run amok, what are we, the Supreme Court, going to do about it? Now they have a case right in front of them. They can't just start ruling about all kinds of things, but they have a case right in front of them. This immunity case. And it is my hope, I won't yet say belief, but it is my hope that any justices who are sitting on the fence, watching what's taking place, the Federal Bill of Rights shredded with gag orders, a lack of due process. You don't even know what the hell the crime is. You don't even know who the witnesses are until 24 hours before. Evidence dumped into the trial. 30,000 documents. And still the judge moves on, a conflicted judge. They have to be watching this and saying, we can contribute to this. I don't care what Kagan says, or Jackson says, or Sotomayor says about their hypotheticals, their wild-eyed hypotheticals. We don't deal with wild-eyed hypotheticals in the Supreme Court. We deal with reality. We deal with practicality. We deal with the Constitution and the facts in front of us. And the facts in front of us tell us, look at what's happening in the country today. Is the problem that there aren't enough prosecutors prosecuting a former president? 91 charges. You got 34 charges in this one courtroom, which are outrageous. You have a dead state statute that he's trying to revive by claiming a federal offense that he will not describe that requires intent. How can you have intent to violate a federal offense that you can't describe? And there hasn't been a shred of evidence. 5 weeks that the defendant, Donald Trump, even knew about any federal campaign law. There is nothing on the record other than the testimony of a disgusting reprobate scumbag about what Donald Trump told him. Oh, okay, great. There's no evidence of anything that ties this to a federal campaign violation, and even if it tied it to the federal campaign laws, they weren't broken. How do we know? Because the FEC said so. This is Alice in Wonderland in 1984 combined. Alice in Wonderland in 1984 combined. So the question for the Supreme Court justices, other than the three radicals who are in the bag for Biden and the Democrat Party, the question for the other six is this. If you don't reject this case out of hand because it is the federal criminalization of what were previously normal, regular, historical campaign practices with a separate set of electors, with contacting election officials. Notice they don't have a single act of outright electoral or voting improprieties. Nothing. The act of sending a second set of electors, the act of challenging an election, the act of saying an election wasn't accurate, the act of asking, are there any more votes in the... You understand what prosecutors can do with this to anybody at any time. To allow Jack Smith to criminalize a process that is rough and tumble, it requires a lot of give and take, that is not the prettiest process in the world, but it is a free electoral process that is addressed and any issues resolved by the political process, by the states, by the Congress, not by the courts, certainly not by the federal courts, certainly not at the instigation of a criminal prosecutor. If they allow this immunity case to go forward, they will do severe damage to the electoral process. They will do severe damage to the justice system. Now, if it goes forward and they rule based on the information that the government insists they rule on, and if they rule for the government, it's over. The justice system will eventually collapse by the weight of the litigation. The electoral system will never be trusted again. And you will have lawfare for the rest of time, times 1,000 of what's going on today. Local judges elected, local judges appointed, federal judges, federal appellate judges, the Supreme Court. It'll be non-stop. And it'll become much more difficult to figure out the boundaries. So now the court, as I speak to you, the Supreme Court. By the way, who else addresses these things the way I do? I look at what's going on. I could tell you about the federal law I have. I could tell you about the state law I have. I can tell you about Cohen's testimony I have. But it's beyond that. It's bigger than that. Much bigger than that. The Supreme Court, the timing is perfect, has a case in front of it where it needs to decide if it's going to allow this sort of thing and even contribute to it. It has a prosecutor who's unconstitutionally appointed by every serious analysis of his appointment. 2 former attorneys general think so. So do I. You have a case that has been criminalized the political process. One of the allegations against Trump is the criminalization of free speech. Well, the Hitler Youth are running around doing pretty much whatever they want. Oh, that's free speech, but not Trump. They're going to take bad facts, the bad abuse of law, They're targeting Donald Trump, and they're going to use that to destroy our country because Jack Smith says so? So what the court should do is, on reflection, the majority, say this case should never have been brought here. The allegations, the criminalization of politics, we're sending it to the lower courts. We're not accepting the way this case has been presented. We're not accepting the lower courts embracing it. That would be a major move. I understand it takes courage. But we need courage. We need a Marbury versus Madison. We need a Brown versus Board of Education. We need big ideas, big thoughts from big people who will do the right thing. We need a seminal decision. The justices are not equipped because nobody's equipped to do what Jack Smith is demanding them to do. To redefine the office of the presidency based on charges brought by Jack Smith. So the Manhattan case demonstrates, as many have before, no, prosecutors are not to be trusted. That's not the way the system works. Number two, a president has to have immunity after he leaves office. There will be no end to this. They will open a door to everything. And number three, this case in front of the court is an utterly bogus case. It attempts to draw in constitutional issues, and it does. The criminalization of politics is the destruction of the republic. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, folks, China, Russia, Iran, they're all on the move. Right here in the U.S., you've got inflation, you have open borders, and, of course, an election year. Oh, and we just crossed over $34 trillion in debt with no signs of slowing down. It's time to wake up, folks. There's a lot at risk, possibly even your retirement account. The time to protect yourself is before a crisis, not after. Advantage Gold, the gold and silver company I recommend to help Americans. Well, they'll help you prepare now for times just like these. Call them at 800-900-8000 today. Get their free 2024 gold and silver kit. Plus, tell them I sent you, and they'll give you a special Mark Levin discount worth up to $1,300 if you qualify. Call Advantage Gold today. Here's the number, 800-900-8000. Plus, see if you qualify to get your special discount worth up to $1,300 today, 800-900-8000. Performance may vary. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. You should always consult your financial and tax professional. The House Republicans, God bless them. God bless them. Can you imagine if the Democrats controlled the House as well? I'm going to discuss this further after the bottom. The House Republicans have put together a bill, short and sweet, to vote on in the House and in the Senate and to send to Biden, to compel him to follow the law, to send the weapons to Israel that were paid for. The Democrat whip from Massachusetts looks like she hasn't showered in about 4 years. She is whipping the Democrats, saying this is a MAGA stunt. Minutes ago, Joe Biden put out a veto threat that if this passes the House and the Senate, he will veto it. This is good versus evil, the Republicans versus the Democrats, Israel versus Hamas. You know, folks, we've got an awful lot swirling around this country, both internally and externally. We've got wars going on in all parts of the world. We've got riots effectively going on in our colleges and universities. We have inflation through the roof. It's an election year to boot. All these problems are often huge tailwinds for gold, which is why gold is at all-time highs, looking like it's going to go higher. And when it comes to gold, I only trust my friends at Advantage Gold. They help Americans just like you protect your retirement accounts and help safeguard your wealth through diversification. So call them right now. 800-900-8000. Get their free 2024 gold and silver kit plus a special Mark Levin discount worth up to $1,300 if you qualify. Call Advantage Gold right now. 800-900-8000. See if you qualify to get your special Mark Levin discount worth up to $1,300 today. Performance may vary. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. You should always consult your financial and tax professional.
Mark Levin, the champion of liberty and true conservatism. Call Mark now. 877-381-3811.
This is how you do it. This is how you do it, America. The Hill newspaper, rather left-wing. Nonetheless, Brett Samuels, Biden issues veto threat over misguided GOP bill on weapons to Israel. Now, I want you to understand how thoroughly committed the Biden administration is to Hamas's survival. And let me add another thing. Do you know there's a war going on, not just with Hamas, but with Hezbollah? Do you know Hezbollah is firing maybe 100, 200, 300 missiles, maybe 500 a day into the state of Israel? And would we tolerate that? Seriously, would we tolerate that? Coming out of Canada? No, I don't think so. And yet, Biden and Blinken have told the Israelis, you're not to go in there and clean this out. They're funding the Iranians. They're funding Hezbollah. They're protecting Hamas. And the Republicans have said that's enough. The White House said today Biden would veto a House GOP bill intended to pressure him to send weapons to Israel, calling it a misguided reaction to a deliberate distortion of the administration's approach to Israel. Oh, right. The pushback comes ahead of it. Notice how the media do it. Biden's first. Not what the Republicans are doing. The pushback comes ahead of an expected vote this week. It's actually going to be Thursday. On the Israel Security Assistance Support Act, GOP lawmakers introduced the bill after Biden warned he would withhold certain offensive weapons for Israel if their forces invaded Rafah and Gaza. And Blinken goes on the Sunday shows, unchallenged, says there's going to be more withholding, embargoing of arms to Israel if Israel destroys Hamas in Rafah. Arrogant schmuck. Let's go on. But the White House cautioned that legislation would undermine the president's ability to execute an effective foreign policy. The president is violating the Constitution by violating the Impoundment Act. He's withholding, he's embargoing weapons to Israel that is in the middle of a fight for its survival. He's giving aid and comfort to Hamas, who tonight could slaughter all the hostages and there would be no consequence if Joe Biden had his way. Iran moving ahead. Hezbollah moving ahead. The PLO moving ahead. Israel, they've tried to create Israel as some kind of pariah state. The U.S. already paused a shipment of bombs to Israel earlier this month over concerns of a looming full-scale invasion of Rafah. We've gone from, Mr. Producer, Biden and Blinken saying, take out Hamas. To what? Temporary ceasefire. To what? Permanent ceasefire. To what? Get out of Gaza. While missiles are being fired into the state of Israel. So Biden warns last week on CNN that Israel is not going to get weapons. Precision weapons. Exactly what you need in urban warfare. So the House bill urges the expeditious delivery of defense articles and services to Israel, condemns the Biden administration's decision to pause shipments to Israel, and reaffirms Israel's right to self-defense. It also calls for funds for the Secretaries of Defense and State and the National Security Council to be withheld until defense articles are delivered to Israel. Exactly. There's no slowdown, no embargo of monies to Iran. Why is that? Well, I don't know if I'll have time tonight, but I want to continue on what we discussed yesterday about the left, the Jews, and Israel. This massive anti-Semitism with the Marxists, the Islamists, the Islamo-Marxists, if you will. And you have significant Jewish individuals, obviously not exclusively, but look, there's no denying it. I take no comfort in this. The anti-Semites out there love this, but I take no comfort in this, but the truth is the truth. And it is thoroughly, thoroughly proven. And so when you have people like Antony Blinken, and you have people like Bernie Sanders and Thomas Friedman, their minds, their ideologies, their lives are about Marxism or Marxism light. It's okay to have a Jewish state if it's secular, if its boundaries are malleable, if it's not stronger than all the other countries around it. In fact, because it's a Jewish state and people there actually practice their faith, not all, but a lot, it is a hindrance to human progress. Don't you see? A hindrance. Israel's under attack as I speak to you. They're getting slammed with these missiles. They don't tell you that almost 1 million Israelis have had to be moved from the northern part of Israel because these missiles are slamming in there. You don't hear about that, do you? Not from Blinken. We're going to have on this program, and I'm excited about it, our friend Miranda Devine at 7:20. And she's written brilliantly about Antony Blinken, his ties to Soros, how he uses his position as Secretary of State to advance a radical agenda, a Soros-type agenda. This isn't conspiracy theory. Look, these people are free to sue me, Mr. Producer, are they not? But they don't. Why don't they? Number one, I'll kick their ass. That's number one. Number two, I don't give up. Number three, I'll do discovery. But number four, I'm telling you the truth. Truth is a complete defense. I'd love nothing more than to get into their finances in a civil case. Nothing more. But they don't. Whether it's CARE, Students for Justice in Palestine, Soros, or the rest. But this ideology I talked about the other night, Marxism. The number one enemy when it comes to faith of Marxism is Judaism. And yet you ask, and many of you do, and you make a good... I'm asked, but what about Marx? He was Jewish. No, he was born a Jew. Wasn't Jewish. What about Bernie Sanders? No, he was born a Jew. He's not really Jewish. What about Noam Chomsky? Same thing. You know, we've talked about the Frankfurt School. I wrote about it in American Marxism. The Frankfurt School in Frankfurt, Germany, was a communist hotbed. And out of there was born critical race theory. I wrote about it extensively. The 5 serious intellectuals who ran that school were communists. They had to flee Germany because of Nazism, of course. All 5 of them were Jewish, Mr. Producer, including Herman Marcuse. This helps build anti-Semitism against the rest of us, because people say, well, look at that Jew over there. You don't understand. That's not what it is. These are Marxists. They're not really Jews. They're Marxists. They're born with certain last names. They're born with certain heritages, but they reject them. They reject them. And so they pray to false idols, like Marxism. They're not Jews. They're Marxists. That's how they view themselves. Now they'll throw out, hey, I'm a Jew, I'm all for Israel, but they better stop that. That's camouflage. The Islamists love Bernie Sanders. If he walked through Gaza today, he'd be a conquering hero. Blinken has come to the protection of Hamas and Hezbollah in Iran. Soros has spent untold sums of money trying to destroy the state of Israel. Democrat Party billionaires, not all Jewish, many are Gentile, backing movements that you saw on our colleges and universities for the Hitler Youth. Biden didn't tell them to stop. Look at Central and South America. Look at Brazil. It's led by a communist. He's an anti-Semite. Look at Nicaragua. Ortega. Communist. He's an anti-Semite. Look at Xi in China. Holding meetings with Hamas and Fatah to try and get them to work together. The world's biggest Marxist. He's an anti-Semite. Why is that? As I explained last night, Judaism is 4,000 years old. The Bible gets into the way of the Marxist. The belief in eternal truths, natural law, God-given rights, the Ten Commandments, and beyond. They are kryptonite to Marxists and Islamists. Kryptonite. And so when people talk about the chosen people in the Bible, evangelical Christians talk about this and so forth, and Christians, of course, talk about the return of Jesus. Jews talk about the return of a Messiah and so forth. You get the point. You've got to strike at the core if you're a Marxist and an Islamist. And the core is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The core is Moses. You must destroy the core. You must eliminate its followers, or Marxism cannot succeed, or Islamism cannot succeed. You look at Bernie Sanders. I've decided I'm going to do an entire monologue on him, either this weekend or next, on Fox. He goes to Israel. As I told you, he joins a kibbutz. He joins a kibbutz. Does he join a kibbutz because of the Jewish experience? No. Because right there at that kibbutz, it's a Stalinist communal. A Stalinist communal. Thomas Friedman of the New York Times, he too, as a young man, joined a kibbutz that was a radical Marxist kibbutz. He didn't go there for the Jewish experience, quote unquote. He went there for the Marxist experience. Noam Chomsky, same thing. Same thing. George Soros wants to remake the world. Got to remake the world. Well, you got to destroy Jerusalem. All these ideas about God and natural law and eternal truths, we got to get rid of that, or we can't remake the world. The Islamists want to conquer the world. It's not just one faith, it's their practice of that one faith. And, of course, there can't be any discourse, disagreement of any kind. And so you have this fusion now of the Marxists and the Islamists. You actually have Antony Blinken, who is half Jewish, to the extent he is at all, Antony Blinken defending, forget about his words, his actions, defending sort of the Hitler last stand, like in Berlin. He wants to ensure that Hamas survives with its 4 battalions. He does not want Israel to destroy them. He lies about the casualty numbers. The same administration that funded October 7th, the same administration that caused God knows how many casualties in Afghanistan, the same administration that's responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans in this country because of its border policies. You're being told to believe the Hamas numbers on the civilian deaths in Gaza. It seems to me an American death on the southern border as a result of our policies is at least as important to Americans as that as a Gazan. No, Mr. Producer? I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
All over the world, our enemies are on the move. And in our own country, same thing. Things are tough between rising prices, election issues, a $34 trillion debt. But folks, there is good news. If you're smart, you can use these problems to your advantage. By making the right choices right now, you can keep your retirement money safe and even make more money in this climate. That's where Advantage Gold comes in. They're experts in helping Americans protect their savings with gold and silver. It's called diversification. Call Advantage Gold today, 800-900-8000. They'll send you a free 2024 gold and silver kit that tells you how to keep your money safe when things are bad. Tell them I sent you, and you may qualify for a special Mark Levin discount worth up to $1,300. Call Advantage Gold at 800-900-8000, 800-900-8000. See if you qualify for that special discount worth up to $1,300. That's 800-900-8000. Performance may vary. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. You should always consult your financial and tax professionals. So I want to thank, on behalf of this audience, the House Republicans who are pushing this bill to force Joe Biden to comply with the law, to stop his embargo of weapons of our closest ally, to stop coddling the terrorists. And so guess what happens? This is breaking news from the Wall Street Journal News Department. U.S. President Joe Biden's administration has informed Congress just now that it's moving ahead with sales of munitions to Israel, potentially worth $1 billion. The transfer includes up to $700 million in tank rounds, another $500 million worth of tactical vehicles, and $60 million worth of mortar shells. Remember, this was already passed. The munitions are intended to replenish stocks used during the war against Hamas, though it could take years for everything included in the deal to reach Israel. In other words, they're going to slow walk it. The report comes as Biden has faced pressure over his decision to freeze the transfer of large bombs. It's not just large bombs, you bastard. Fears it could be used in Gaza's city of Rafah. Yeah, God forbid. If they destroy the enemy. God forbid. Keep the pressure on, boys. This is a fig leaf. This is a fan dance. Keep the pressure on and make the Democrats, make them vote. I'll be back. This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Let's get down to the nitty-gritty, America. How's the economy doing? Well, you know it's doing very, very poorly when the media won't cover the statistics that came out today. And this affects you directly. Directly. CNBC. Federal Chair Powell, the Federal Reserve Chair, says inflation has been higher than thought, expects rates to hold steady. Powell reiterated today that inflation is falling more slowly than expected and will keep the central bank on hold for an extended period. Now, what he's saying there is the producer price index. Now, that has an effect on you. But you see, when we talk about certain goods and services, that's what's key. So if the price of some things are going down that don't affect your daily life, that's all great. But that's averaged into the price of eating. And this last time I checked, everybody needs to eat. So, speaking to the annual general meeting of the Foreign Bankers Association, the central bank leader noted that the rapid disinflation that happened in 2023 is slowed. Yes, disinflation. They make words up. Bloomberg. U.S. household debt has reached a record and more borrowers are struggling to keep up. Overall, U.S. household debt rose to $17.7 trillion, according to the Federal Reserve Bank on New York's quarterly report. That's an increase of $184 billion or 1.1% in one quarter. And the data highlight the mounting financial pressures on American families in an age of elevated inflation. Why don't they call it what it is? Stagflation. You're going deeper and deeper in debt. The costs are going up and up, but the value of your money is going down and down because of inflation. This is the worst of all scenarios. And it can lead to a depression. You know, Mr. Buddha, it's a funny thing. I've been talking about this for years, warning about this for years, and people say, well, it hasn't happened since I've been alive. It doesn't happen overnight. I know it's not glitzy. I know this isn't being discussed at most places. It's being discussed by me. Because when it comes, it'll not only be glitzy, it'll be a disaster. Consumers have added $3.4 trillion in debt since the pandemic. And that increased debt bears much higher interest rates. Total credit card debt stood at $1.12 trillion in the first quarter of 2024. That's down slightly in the fourth quarter, in line with seasonal patterns of consumers paying debt incurred over the holidays. But credit card businesses are up almost 25%. Gee, I wonder why. As of March, 3.2% of outstanding debt was in some stage of delinquency. Delinquency. People are going broke. People are going broke. They're borrowing more and more. They're using credit cards. It's a disaster. Inflation is not curbed. Inflation is going up. Joblessness is going up. Illegal immigration is going up. All the wrong things are going up, and all the wrong things are going down. And at a minimum, you expect your government to conduct itself in a way where it's not destroying your paycheck, where it's not destroying your life and your lifestyle, the ability to feed your family, the ability to go from point A to B. You can't even get a vacation anymore. This is America. As Biden said, it's America. We can do anything. Really? Then resign, you a-hole. That would be a good thing. The name of that, okay, here we are. An economic specter haunts America. They write at the Telegraph, Samuel Gregg. It's also one that many American politicians, both parties, say a great deal about but are reluctant to address. The name of that shadow is the United States national debt. It's defined as the amount of money the federal government has borrowed to cover the outstanding balance of expenses incurred over time. If you go to the Treasury's website, you can see just how big that debt is. In mid-May, it was $34.5 trillion. The pace of the growth in that debt is equally stunning. Approximately $1 trillion is being added to America's national debt every 100 days. Historically speaking, America's national debt has taken on huge proportions during national emergencies like World War II. But not like this. The truth is that the rapid growth in America's national debt is driven by two factors. Spending, and entitlements. Now, what they don't say in this piece, and which I've told you, which I've written about in Plunder and Deceit, is the off-books debt. The off-books debt that they never tell you. See, the government has an obligation to people on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and the VA. But especially, I want to focus on Social Security and Medicare. You have an invested right because money is taken out of your paycheck or out of your business on a regular basis in the claim that this is insurance, retirement insurance and health insurance. The problem is it's a Ponzi scheme. They've spent all your money. They broke into the Social Security trust funds. They broke into the Medicare trust funds, and they spent all your money. Nobody's going to go to prison for this. Nobody. And every time somebody suggests a fix, like, okay, maybe what we ought to do is everybody who's 50 and under, we're going to change the system somewhat. Oh, they want to kill Social Security. Social Security's dying. But the point is, ladies and gentlemen, we have almost $300 trillion in entitlement obligations that your children and grandchildren are going to have to deal with. When we come back, I think, Miranda Devine. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Once again, Pure Talk, my sponsor, my wireless company, is investing in their customers. That's you. I'm happy to announce Pure Talk is now offering international roaming to over 50 countries. That's right. As you plan your summer travel, make sure your wireless provider has you covered at home and abroad. Pure Talk already puts you on America's most dependable 5G network, but now they're offering you coverage in over 50 countries as well. You get unlimited talk, unlimited text, plenty of 5G data, just $20 a month. And that's less than half the price of Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile. They're ripping you off, folks. Bring your phone and get great savings on the latest iPhones and Androids. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/Levin and make the switch right now. Again, this month, when you go to puretalk.com/Levin, you'll save an additional 50% on your first month. Folks, switch to Pure Talk so you can afford to travel this summer. It's a pleasure to have Miranda Devine with us of the New York Post, and bigger than that, too. Miranda Devine, you have done some of the leading investigation and writing about Antony Blinken's background, his parents, their association with Soros, how he's used his office to advance sort of a personal family Soros agenda. Can you, I know we don't have a lot of time, but can we start this discussion and tell us a little bit about this?
Yes, sure, Mark. Thanks for having me on. I think Antony Blinken is a very curious character. He's hardly American. I mean, he is American, but he went to school in Paris. He's really a Europhile. And in Paris, he met with his childhood friend, a man called Robert Malley, who he then brought in to the Obama administration first as the sort of anti-Israel Iran envoy. Robert Malley himself, of Arabic background. And then when Donald Trump took office, he abandoned, threw away the nuclear deal, which was a bad deal for America. And by the time he left office, Donald Trump, Iran was broke. Of course, then Joe Biden comes in, he reanimates this ill-fated deal, this Iran nuclear deal, and Antony Blinken, his Secretary of State, brings in his old childhood friend again, Rob Malley, to be the Iran envoy. And lo and behold, last year, very quietly, this enormous scandal broke, which was that Robert Malley is still under investigation by the FBI for mishandling, is a nice way of putting it, classified information. Allegedly, some classified information on his phone found its way into enemy hands. Mm-hmm. And yet this man is just suspended with pay, and I think he got a gig at Princeton University. So this is the kind of people that that the Biden administration and their friends at the universities give succor to.
Now, Antony Blinken himself, his parents set up a foundation, as I understand it, in Hungary. The chairman was Soros, who funded this foundation. Are you aware of that?
Yeah. I think this was his father and his stepmother. His parents split, or it may have been his mother and his stepfather. Very close, Hungarian, very close with George Soros. You know, this goes back to Antony Blinken's childhood. And so those family ties are very deep.
And you've pointed out that he actually went after a former party leader in Hungary who went crossways with Soros, who's also, I guess, from Hungary, right?
You're talking about Viktor Orban?
Yes. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Viktor Orban in Hungary is a very strong leader, a Trumpian character, and in fact an ally of Donald Trump. He has been vilified by the State Department headed by Antony Blinken because he's refused to go along with these kind of globalist ideas that you're supposed to open your borders to all kinds of unvetted illegal migrants. And Viktor Orban refused to do that. He built a wall and made sure that there were no illegal migrants coming across. So Hungary alone in that part of the world does not have the kind of problems that are plaguing Sweden now with rapes and crime. And, I think Sweden is the second most dangerous country in Europe. It has car bombings, more car bombings, I think. No, second most dangerous country in the world when it comes to bombings after Mexico. That's what I heard the other day. It's a, shocking state of affairs since Angela Merkel opened up the floodgates during the Syrian crisis to, for Germany, I think it was 2 million Muslim men, military-aged men came across the border, which is similar to what's happening here. But Viktor Orban refused to do that, and that, of course, made him the enemy. Also, what Antony Blinken did in the State Department was Hungary has, retained its sort of Hungarian characteristics. It's a Christian, very socially conservative country. So what did they do? They send, as the ambassador to Hungary from the United States, they send a gay ambassador with his male husband and their adopted children. That's fine in America, but it was just seen as a snub to the Hungarians. I mean, they're civilized people. Of course, they're not going to be rude, but it was just a deliberate kind of thumbing the nose at the Hungarians for refusing to go along with the sort of rainbow agenda that the State Department is shoving down the throats of conservative societies all over the world to America's detriment. You just have to remember the rainbow flag hanging outside the U.S. Embassy in Kabul when Afghanistan fell.
Miranda Devine, this guy Malley who you referred to, his father was a radical, pro-Islamist, sort of a scholar, spent a lot of time in Egypt. As you point out, Antony Blinken, his family and Antony Blinken, they were buddies. And, of course, Blinken chooses him as the envoy to Iran, as you point out. And then Malley hires 3 other individuals, one of whom, emails have since been released, was back-channeling information and communication with the foreign minister's office in Iran. And this is bigger than the Alger Hiss scandal. And yet the media acts like these things aren't even happening. Isn't this a massive scandal?
It's enormous. Honestly, Mark, it's hard to believe. Lee Smith in The Tablet wrote the definitive, broke the story, an investigative piece about Robert Malley and his little envoys that he poked into various parts of the government, including the Pentagon. A woman, I won't pronounce her name properly, but Ariana Tabatini, I think is the correct pronunciation. She's in the Pentagon in a very high position. And, I would have thought since Robert Malley is under investigation that there should be some questions about the people that he installed in the administration. And that's not happening. And, you know, the other thing about Antony Blinken, which we shouldn't forget, is that he was instrumental in getting the that dishonest letter from the Dirty 51, the former CIA directors and other officials that pretended that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. He was a senior advisor for the Biden campaign, and after our first story came out in the New York Post about the laptop, he set about to do this dirty tricks campaign, and he called on Mike Morell, a former acting director of the CIA, who was hoping to be the director under Joe Biden. And he said he's testified that it was Antony Blinken's phone call to him that triggered the desire in him to get this letter written.
You know, he tries to come across as this dour, very senior sort of Ivy League intellectual who gives very thoughtful and so, but he's really a bomb thrower, isn't he? Look what he's doing with Israel. Look how he's protecting Hamas. Look how this Iran policy is to fund Iran and fund Iran surrogates while basically embargoing Israel. I mean, this is pretty sick, radical left-wing stuff, isn't it?
It is. It really is. It's very weak. I think he's a loose European-style intellectual who's been brought up all over the world and doesn't have an understanding of the reality of life and how people behave. I mean, this is the thing about Donald Trump. He cut his teeth in the cutthroat world of real estate in New York, dealing with gangsters and, you know, Chinese gangsters as well as American gangsters and, you know, unionists and so on. And so he knows how the real world works. He knows that there are sharks out there who will kill you if you're not strong. And whereas Antony Blinken grew up in this rarefied atmosphere of, you know, cocktail parties at embassies and where nothing touches you, and he's conducting America's foreign policy as if everybody's a gentleman around the world. And, you know, October 7th, he should have seen the barbarity of the attacks on Israel and understood that it's not like that. It's not a cocktail party. This world is very dangerous, and he's putting America in danger. He's certainly putting Israel in danger. And what Israel... I went to a lunch today with Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, who engineered the Abraham Accords. You know, he was unequivocal about the fact that America needs to be projecting strength. It is bad for America to have Israel in this position, to have all the allies around the world say, well, how can we trust America in future? It's just a parlous situation.
I just can't imagine, Miranda Devine, 4 more years of this. The damage will be so severe. It will be so fundamental. I don't know how we would pull out of it. Do you?
Absolutely not. I mean, look at Joe Biden right now. He can't last 4 years. Whoever are the people propping him up are completely incompetent, and he makes decisions himself. I'm not letting him off the hook at all.
Right. But
he's really not the full quid. This is a difficult job. You need to be on top of your game. You can't have any cognitive deficits.
Miranda Devine, I want you to know, we got a lot of listeners. They all love you. Me too. You're fantastic. Keep it up, my friend.
Thank you so much. Lovely to talk to you, Mark.
God bless you. Miranda Devine. She is special. I'll be right back. Once again, Pure Talk, my sponsor, my wireless company, is investing in their customers. That's you. I'm happy to announce Pure Talk is now offering international roaming to over 50 countries. That's right. As you plan your summer travel, make sure your wireless provider has you covered at home and abroad. Pure Talk already puts you on America's most dependable 5G network, but now they're offering you coverage in over 50 countries as well. You get unlimited talk, unlimited text, plenty of 5G data, just $20 a month. And that's less than half the price of Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile. They're ripping you off, folks. Bring your phone and get great savings on the latest iPhones and Androids. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/LEVIN and make the switch right now. Again, this month, when you go to puretalk.com/Levin, you'll save an additional 50% on your first month. Folks, switch to Pure Talk so you can afford to travel this summer.
If Mark has banned you from the show, we have a special number you can call to reach him, 877-381-3811.
By the way, I want to thank you folks again. Life, Liberty, and Levin, prime time, Saturday night, prime time, Sunday night, was number one. It is every weekend, actually, because of you. And we defeated, of course, CNN and MSNBC. This never gets reported anywhere. It's okay. As long as I know you're out there, that's all that matters. Like this show, it never gets discussed anywhere. We're on God knows how many platforms. Multiple platforms. You see, some people play a ratings game. Their show isn't on satellite, or their show isn't on podcast, or their show isn't on so many platforms like this show, and then they say, oh, look at my radio ratings. If I did that, if I was only on radio, nobody would defeat our ratings. But we have to look at the whole universe of people. We have to go where people go. Sometimes they're on radio, sometimes they're on podcasts, sometimes they're listening on satellite, sometimes they go to YouTube, sometimes you want to use your iPhone or your Android, and so we're in all those places. Because I don't play games. My goal is to get the mission out there. The mission. Not the Michigots, the mission. I got a treat for you. I call him my pastor. Pastor Hagee. Dear friend of ours, dear friend of the family, as is his family. This is a great man out of San Antonio, Texas. He's the founder of CUFI, Christians United for Israel. He has an enormous following, and you're about to find out why. Listen to this beautiful message. Go.
Greetings to our television partners across America and around the world. Our topic today is the president's war against the Jews. President Biden claims he is a lifelong friend of the Jewish people and a Zionist. But these empty words of cover for his lifelong war against the Jewish people. For many American Jews, the months since October 7th have felt like a horror movie as they watch with increasing alarm as their president, Joe Biden, for whom many of them voted, seems to throw Israel under the bus. The UN report from its Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General revealed what Israel has been saying for months, namely that Hamas committed the most vile sexual violence and torture on October the 7th, and such treatment likely continues to be perpetrated on hostages. Experts from the United Nations, an organization that is consistently hostile toward the Jewish state, actually found, quote, clear and convincing information that some hostages have been subjected to various forms of sexual violence, including rape, sexual torture, and sexualized cruelty, inhumane and degrading treatment, and it also has reasonable grounds to believe that such violence may be ongoing, end of quote. In reaction, Joe Biden's State Department chose to level the charge of sexual abuse at Israel. Indeed, Biden briefly expressed empathy with Israel after the vicious attack, but since then, along with his Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, Biden has been working at breakneck speed to undermine Israel in its existential battle against Iran, funded by Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists. This campaign has now extended to official blood libels about deliberate Israeli campaigns of genocide, famine, starvation, baby killing, and sexual abuse, culminating in the administration's betrayal of Israel and siding with Hamas at the Security Council. In the blink of an eye, President Biden went from framing Hamas as a, quote, pure and unadulterated evil, end quote, to putting immense pressure on Israel to stand down, cease fire. That pressure from the president against Israel is not of recent origin. More than 40 years ago, Joe Biden prompted one of the most famous phrases ever uttered by Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. In a private session with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in 1982, Senator Biden threatened Prime Minister Menachem Begin with cutting off U.S. aid if Israel did not stop, quote, settlements in Judea and Samaria, end quote. Prime Minister Begin responded to Senator Biden saying, "Don't threaten us, the Jewish people, with cutting off your aid. It will not work. I am not a Jew with trembling knees. I am a proud Jew with 3,700 years of civilized history. Nobody came to our aid when we were dying in the gas chambers and the ovens. No one came to our aid when we were starving to create our country. We paid for it. We fought for it. We died for it. We will stand by our principles. We will defend them, and when necessary, we will die for them again, with or without your aid," end quote. President Biden's scorn of Israel's current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is significantly more vocal, referring to Netanyahu as, quote, "a bad blankety blank blank blank." That's a curse word that he used. Language that is difficult to imagine him using about any other leader of a friendly foreign state. More recently, President Biden, as he swaggered his way out of the State of the Union speech, told Blinken and others, quote, "I told him, Bibi, and don't repeat this, but you and I are going to have a come to Jesus meeting," end of quote. President Biden knew he was on a live microphone and admitted as much. He wanted the world to know exactly what he thinks of Israel's prime minister, and to broadcast that he was putting the squeeze on Israel to force it to forego its ability to defend itself. In fact, this has been Biden's posture from day one. Just one day after October the 7th slaughter, Secretary of State Blinken, in concert with Turkey, called for a ceasefire from Israel on the evening of October the 8th. 2 days later, Biden's National Security Council spokesman called on Israel to show restraint and take only, quote, necessary and proportionate action to defend itself. The inconvenient truth here is that there was a ceasefire on October the 6th. Hamas broke it with financial and military assistance from Iran. Iran is a terrorist state that is flush with billions of dollars in sanctions relief as a direct result of Biden's disastrous policy of gifting the Islamic Republic with cash. On November the 14th, the administration extended a sanctions waiver allowing Iran to access $10 billion. U.S. spokesmen have repeatedly been unable to deny that money delivered by President Biden to Iran were not used in funding the October 7th attack against Israel, because those funds most certainly were used. The God of the Bible is a God of covenant, who keeps covenant for 1,000 generations. He has made this covenant with the state of Israel and the Jewish people. Quote, "I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you," end of quote. God has said concerning the Jewish people, quote, "He that touches you touches the apple of my eye." America, in its present abuse of Israel and the poison of anti-Semitism flowing out of our universities into the streets of this nation, are flirting with the wrath of God. Wake up, America. Wake up. If we don't use our freedom to defend our freedom, we're going to lose our freedom. End of quote.
Is he not fantastic? I could never have said it any better. The Pastor Hagee, my pastor. What do you mean, Mark? Well, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but he really is. He's just a fantastic guy, and I wanted you to hear from him. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Once again, Pure Talk, my sponsor, my wireless company, is investing in their customers. That's you. I'm happy to announce Pure Talk is now offering international roaming to over 50 countries. That's right. As you plan your summer travel, make sure your wireless provider has you covered at home and abroad. Pure Talk already puts you on America's most dependable 5G network, but now they're offering you coverage in over 50 countries as well. You get unlimited talk, unlimited text, plenty of 5G data, just $20 a month. And that's less than half the price of Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile. They're ripping you off, folks. Bring your phone and get great savings on the latest iPhones and Androids. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/Levin and make the switch right now. Again, this month, when you go to puretalk.com/Levin, you'll save an additional 50% on your first month. Folks, switch to Pure Talk so you can afford to travel this summer. You know, on Mother's Day, I was alone on Mother's Day. My wife and my mother-in-law, they needed to go to another location to check things out in my mother-in-law's home. And what a beautiful home. And I like to get there as often as I can as well. And I decided on Mother's Day that I would visit my mother, and who was buried next to my father in these crypts. I hate that word. About 60 or 70 miles from our home in Florida. And I drove there, and a lot of thoughts went through my mind. All kinds of thoughts. You know, it's almost at warp speed. When we were little kids and they were raising us, how they took us to do different things, how they taught us lessons, how my mother always made us dinner, and even as I got older, when I would visit them, she always would make me a sandwich and put some grapes or whatever in a bag and send me off with food. How my dad, I think I was 20 or 19 years old, taking a trip overseas. I was in Washington. Then I realized my passport had dropped out of my pocket, Mr. Producer, the night before. So he drove all the way home to the suburbs of Philadelphia. It was on the floor in my bedroom. He picked it up and he drove all the way back, just in time for me to get on that bus at 7 a.m. and take that flight. Just so many thoughts about what parents do for children. And I miss them so deeply. And so I went there and I talked to them. Not out loud. Through my thoughts. And I spoke to them. And I thanked them for everything. For giving us life, for protecting us, for teaching us everything, absolutely selfless. They worked so hard. They had nothing. So hard. And they worked so hard, they were lower middle class, and they worked themselves in the middle class. But you know, they started a nursery school and a day camp. Probably couldn't do it today, right behind the police station. And we, the three boys, we lived in a one bedroom as little tiny kids. And then the rest of the property was for the nursery school or the camp. And they made all the food, and my dad built all the bunks, furniture, and all the rest of it. Just so hard they worked. They never complained. They despised the left. They despised the whole notion of a welfare state. They didn't take a penny from anybody. They despise the liberal media. They despise the Democrat Party. They said, these people, these entities, they're destroying our country. And right on the crypt, among other things, we put the phrase, American Patriots. American Patriots. That's exactly what they were.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. You know, the genocidal murdering maniac that runs Turkey, his name is Erdogan, almost like the name of the judge, you know, in the other Manhattan case involving Letitia James. Erdogan, I guess the G is Wan. He's an Islamist. The other day he said Netanyahu is worse than Hitler. You understand. Of course, he's a mass murderer. He imprisons his political opponents. He blew out the top brass in his military and police departments and so forth. And he destroyed what was a fantastic country, Turkey, that was set up as a non-Islamist country, like a Western country, by Ataturk. So this pig comes in. He's an Islamist. His party takes over, and they never give up. But I wanted to tell you about something. It says here from the American French press, AFP, not American, French press rather, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan confirmed the reopening of a mosque in Istanbul converted from an ancient Byzantine Orthodox church, that is a Christian church, in the face of Greek protests. So he takes this ancient Orthodox Christian church, this Greek church, and he turns it into a mosque right in the middle of Istanbul. He discussed the church in a meeting in Ankara with Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis, on a trip that was meant to strengthen the country's relations. Now, you may not know this. Greek and Turkey have been each other's throats for a long time because Turkey keeps threatening Greece, to be perfectly honest with you. The Karli Mosque, in its new form, will remain open to everyone, Erdogan told a news conference alongside the Greek leader. We've opened our Karli Mosque for worship and visits after painstaking restoration work. I'll bet, to change it from a church to a mosque. Mitsotakis, the head of Greece, had appealed against the conversion of the Holy Savior in Kora, decorated with 14th century frescoes and the Last Judgment that are still treasured by Christians. He complained to Erdogan about the latest move. I discussed with Mr. Erdogan the conversion. I expressed my dissatisfaction with him. It is very important to preserve the unique cultural value of this monument, and it is listed as in the UNESCO World Heritage so that it can remain accessible to all visitors. But the church was converted into Karli Mosque half a century after the 1453 conquest of Constantinople by the Ottoman Turks. Became the Karli Mosque after World War II, when Turkey sought to create a more secular republic from the ashes of the Ottoman Empire. Erdogan in 2020 ordered the building to be reconverted into a Muslim place of worship. I should have said it was turned into a museum under Ataturk. It was converted into a mosque by Erdogan. His order came following a similarly controversial ruling on the UNESCO-protected Hagia Sophia Cathedral in Istanbul. What did they do? Convert that to a mosque as well? You know, the Muslims in the Middle East, they have a habit of doing this. When Jordan stole Jerusalem from the Jews, they were destroying the synagogues. In fact, they destroyed almost all of them, I think. Destroyed or defaced. And the Israeli police, they protect the mosques there. They protect what's called the Arab section. They protect the Armenian section. They protect the Christian section. Erdogan, he's a pig. I don't think you'd want to be called a pig. Do you, Mr. Producer? I don't think so. I want to read something else to you from the Wall Street Journal. Amit Siegel. How much is the American presidential seal worth? The majestic eagle circled by stars was, until recently, highly valuable. A warranty backed by the world's mightiest military, political, and economic power. That's why a letter of commitment bearing the presidential seal of the United States played a crucial role at the turning point in Israel's history 20 years ago. In the spring of 2004, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon encountered obstacles trying to advance his plan for a total withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. There were no Muslims there. There were no Palestinians there, I should say. No Palestinians. There were Jews and IDF posts. It was never Palestinian. Of course, none of these areas were. At the time, Gaza was home to thousands of settlers in several divisions of the Israel Defense Forces. The concerns were twofold. First, the precedent of a withdrawal to the 1967 borders in Gaza might eventually be applied to Judea and Samaria, creating indefensible borders for Israel, which is what Biden wants right now, and Blinken. And second, that the move would be interpreted as a retreat under fire, strengthening terrorist groups in the Gaza Strip. Well, what happened? President George W. Bush came to Sharon's aid. But what did he do? He dispatched a letter that helped win the support of Israel's ministers and Knesset members that Sharon needed. Many recall Mr. Bush's implicit promise in the letter to Sharon, quote, "It is unrealistic to expect that the outcome of final status negotiations will be a full and complete return to the armistice lines of 1949, unquote, meaning that Israel will be able to retain the parts of Judea and Samaria where the settlement blocks were and are." In recent discussions with high-ranking officials in Israel and the U.S., he writes, I was surprised to learn that some had forgotten another, far firmer commitment in the letter. Quote, ready for this, folks? Ready for this? Israel will retain its right to defend itself against terrorism, including to take actions against terrorist organizations. The United States will lead efforts working together with Jordan, Egypt, and others in the international community to build the capacity and will of Palestinian institutions to fight terrorism, dismantle terrorist organizations, and prevent the areas from which Israel has withdrawn from posing a threat that would have to be addressed by any other means. So in other words, Sharon got a promise in a letter from George W. Bush that what took place in Gaza would never take place. This principle, as outlined in the letter, was ratified by both houses of Congress with overwhelming majorities, lending additional weight to the commitments as follows, quote, whereas Israel has the right to defend itself against terrorism, including to take actions against terrorist organizations that threaten Israel's citizens. So while President Obama took office in 2009, when he did, he quickly erased the commitment to recognize the settlement blocks in Judea and Samaria. Officials in his administration were instructed to assert that this document wasn't binding, all the while urging Israel to withdraw to a Distance only a 15-minute drive from Tel Aviv's main intersection. And over the past 20 years, the U.S. has failed in the efforts it pledged to uphold to fight terrorism and prevent Gaza from becoming a threat to Israel. When Hamas took control of Gaza in 2007, the U.S. did nothing. The summer 2014, Obama withheld Hellfire missiles from Israel during its military operation against Hamas. 2021, Biden pressured Israel to discontinue another military operation in Gaza. Now, with his announcement to halt the delivery of weapons, Biden has shredded Bush's letter to Sharon. The consequences will be catastrophic, even if Israel prevails. The entire region and the world are closely watching leaders renege on commitments and strategic partnerships, which is exactly what Obama started and what Biden is finishing. They made a promise, and those two broke it. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Well, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I like interviewing great Americans with great histories and stories to tell, who put everything on the line to try and run for office in order to continue their service. And one of them is a gentleman we've gotten to know, especially my wife has gotten to know him and his wife, and that's Hung Cao. Hung Cao is challenging Senator Tim Kaine for the United States Senate in the state of Virginia. Hung Cao, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here, Mark.
I want you to tell the country about how you came here, your parents came here, and how you served in the military and just the progress through your life.
Yes, sir. So we came here as refugees from Vietnam. My father was high-ranking Vietnamese official from South Vietnam. He was the deputy minister of agriculture. So he was basically going to be marked for death or sent to a re-education camp. And so we snuck out of the country, and we made it here. And this amazing country gave us everything. I mean, I went to the top high school in the country, or it used to be the top until the left destroyed it, Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. I was the very first class to graduate from there. I went to the United States Naval Academy. I earned a bachelor's in engineering. I went to Naval Postgraduate School, where I earned a master's in physics. And I had fellowships at Harvard and MIT. But you know what, Mark? I paid back that American dream, every single dime of it, with 25 years of service in Navy Special Operations. I was a Navy deep-sea diver. I recovered John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife, his sister-in-law. I recovered other aircraft that crashed in the ocean. And I defused bombs for our SEAL teams and Special Forces teams in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia.
Mm-hmm. So you're really a serious combat veteran, and I had no idea about the Kennedys and so forth. That's a big deal. Tell us about your family, your wife, your kids.
Yes, sir. I have a wife and 5 wonderful kids. My wife is an EMT in Loudoun County, and she's also the co-author of our book because, you know, I'm an engineer and physicist. I'm not very eloquent with words the way you are, and she is. But she's also a homeschooler. She homeschooled our kids. My oldest is at the Naval Academy right now getting straight A's because of what she taught him. And so we just want to give back to the community. And honestly, when I left Afghanistan in 2021, it was stable, Mark. And then Joe Biden came in and caused it all fall apart. And I was watching mothers hand babies to Marines. That's just like in Vietnam. And so I just couldn't sit by anymore. The enemy had already infiltrated our ranks. So I retired and ran for U.S. Congress right here in the 10th Congressional District, you know, which includes Loudoun County, where they were attacking parents from the school board.
And you almost won. You missed by an eyelash, didn't you?
Yes, sir. We took that area where Joe Biden won by 19 points, and we took it down to 6%. That's a 13% difference. And we overperformed in President Trump and Governor Youngkin in this area. And that's why they asked us to run for U.S. Senate, because they're like, hey, you don't have to win Northern Virginia. You just need to move the needle the way you did. The South comes out, and you've already won this race.
Now, when your book does come out, I will bring you back because it's a very important book. But you're running against a man, Tim Kaine, who's quite the chameleon. On the one hand, he works very hard and coordinates and with a hard left in America and in Virginia. On the other hand, he presents himself as quite the moderate, soft-spoken moderate. He's been attorney general. He was lieutenant governor. He was governor. Now he's senator. So he's got that pedigree. And as purple as Virginia has come, you feel you have a real shot at this, right?
Yes, sir, we do. Look, like you said, he's a chameleon. But the thing is, no one can remember what Tim Kaine did for Virginia, right? All they remember is he got stuck on I-95 during a snowstorm with a bottle of Dr. Pepper. This is the intelligence of this man, to go out in a snowstorm with just a bottle of Dr. Pepper. But
should honestly, at least be diet
no
Dr. Pepper.
Yeah. Yes, sir. No, it's just ridiculous. He's right now, I mean, he won't choose between Hamas and what's right, which is to condemn the Jewish racism that's happening in this country and to condemn what Hamas did in Israel. How can you not stand for what's right? How can you not see what happened and say, this is wrong and we will not support this?
Mm-hmm. And you're very clear on your moral positions, like you just said. You support Israel against Hamas. There's really no middle ground. And you're very solid on issues about immigration. You know, your family came here, and people say, well, you're an immigrant. That doesn't mean you support millions of people coming here illegally from communist China and other places of the world, correct?
No, sir. Look, my father waited 7 years. The whole family did. The last thing he had hanging over his bed before he passed away 2 years ago was his naturalization papers. That's what was the most important thing to him. And, you know, as an immigrant to this country, I'm telling you right now, don't come to America if you're not willing to obey the American laws and embrace the American culture and assimilate. I love this country so much. I bled for it for 25 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, Tim Kaine, as I recall, he was a member of the Peace Corps, right?
Yes, sir. He did he did 2 years, I think, down in Honduras, and I think they brainwashed him down there because he's really a Sandinista by heart. Like, he really believes in all this stuff that he does, this communism, Marxism, socialism, and now equity. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just, you know, it's just packaged differently, but it's what's destroying America right now. And I want to talk about meritocracy and making America amazing again.
But he does create this false, picture of himself. He gets hope from the radical, massive influence or used to be anyway, of the Washington Post, and the idea that it's Tim Kaine, that he's so harmless and so forth. In many respects, he hangs under the radar, but he pops his head up every now and then. But he really does march in lockstep with Bernie Sanders, with Joe Biden, with the most radical elements in the Democrat Party and the most incompetent elements of the Democrat Party, no?
Oh, absolutely. Don't forget that he was Hillary Clinton's bag man. He's got a PhD from the University of Hillary Crookedness. He knows how to tap into every single dime out there. That's why he's amassed $13 million. And I'm asking your viewers, like right now, I will fight every single battle. I've got the scars to show it. Okay, but I need ammunition. And Tim Kaine has so much money right now. If you want your voice out there, I need your support. I mean, go to hungforva.com and support me so that I can fight for you. I will do it every single day, and I will not allow this country to turn into what I ran away from.
That's hungforva.com. Hung Cao. Hung, let me ask you this. I want to hold you over during the break here. He's apparently raising millions and millions of dollars to overwhelm you in Northern Virginia, in the Norfolk, in the Virginia Beach areas, and a couple more Democrat strongholds, and he figures that'll be enough because you can't raise enough money. Plus, he's going to have all the free media from the Washington Post behind him, too. So let's play this out a little bit. Let's talk about how we do defeat this man, because obviously we have family in Virginia, too. I'll be back.
Mark the pen. The thunder on the right. Call in now. 877-381-3811.
Ryan Tully is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, a great guy. So I'm told, but I believe it. The Wall Street Journal was fed information from the Biden regime, the Blinken State Department, that Biden is notifying Congress that he will be releasing $1 billion in arms to Israel. Those arms may not be delivered for a long time, but they're notifying them. And Ryan Tully calls out this deceit, this fraudulent conduct by this president and his Secretary of State, and he writes, a congressional notification only initiates a process for arms sales. According to reports last week, the weapons last week that were ordered to not be delivered were already approved under a prior congressional notification. Seems like someone is playing word games. So the Wall Street Journal News Department is pushing the administration's propaganda. I guarantee you this will be regurgitated all over the news media, that what Biden and Blinken have done is nothing. A congressional notification only initiates a process for arms sales. It doesn't conclude it. And so the weapons that they're withholding now were already approved under a prior congressional notification. This is why they lie. This is why we despise them. This is why they set up Israel and they treat Israel like a punching bag. Meanwhile, Blinken's over in Ukraine playing the guitar, for God's sakes. I want to thank Ryan Tully of the Hudson Institute and David Milstein for bringing that to my attention. All right. Want to get back to our friend Hung Cao. Hung Cao, so you're going to get the message out, I guess, by outworking Tim Kaine, by trying to get some free media on radio and TV, trying to raise at least enough money to get noticed out there. Is that pretty much the game plan?
Yes, sir. That's exactly it. Here's the thing. We are smarter than them in how we spend. You know, we don't advertise during the day because our voters actually go to work. You know, so we will target certain times when people come out. We will target certain voters. We will target people the way, you know, they've been doing to our voters. And so we will make sure we get the vote out, and we are very good with the money because we don't need to spend as much as they do. They'll raise a lot of money, but they'll waste it. Just like they do in Congress, they waste our money for things like, you know, sending to just blank checks to Ukraine instead of Israel. You know, and it just drives me crazy. I mean, people have no idea what Israel brings to the world. That's the size of New Jersey with the population the size of the Commonwealth of Virginia. But they bring, you know, so much, you know, cyber and electronic and, you know, just innovation. They punch 200 times their weight. And not only that, their advances in medicine for Parkinson's, you know, and muscular sclerosis, and they're so close to curing cancer. That's what they bring to the world. And isn't it amazing?
Isn't it amazing? The terrorists bring nothing but horrific inhumanity to the world. In this tiny little state of Israel, look what it contributes to the world. And we have an administration that is taking the side of Hamas. You can't say it any other way, since they want Hamas to survive and they're trying to stop Israel. This tiny little country that has, for consider its population, more inventions, more patents, more discoveries in medicine, more technological advances. Can you imagine how much more would get done if they would be left alone?
Exactly. And it's just like Americans. Leave us alone also. I mean, we need to innovate and get government out of the way. Stop these bureaucrats from giving these, you know, just mandates of no incandescent light bulbs or ceiling fans or gas stoves. Like, who are you? That's why I want to limit all these regulations from the unelected officials. They have 3 years, and then it dies on the vine, or it has to go to Congress as law, because we can't hold back the American industry anymore. And you know, this is why you need someone like me, who's a physicist, an engineer, who has patents under his names, that understands what it means to innovate.
And a man who saw combat and did things that most other men in this country, many of whom are heroes, cannot do. And that is a big deal. And I want to thank you for everything you've done for the country, Hung Cao. And I want to thank you for running. I know it's difficult. I know you're up against it with the Washington Post and the enormous amounts of money flowing into Virginia to defeat you. We'll do our little part here. Folks, you can go to hung4va.com, HUNG4va.com. And Hung Cao, we wish you all the best, and we'll bring you back.
Thank you,
Oh,
sir.
Wait a minute. I want to make it clear. I'm endorsing you 100%. There you go.
You're the best, sir. Thank you so much, Mr. Levin.
God bless you, my friend. Take care of yourself. Now, that is a tremendous candidate. We look for candidates like this, do we not, Mr. Producer? He almost won that congressional seat which was a dark, dark blue seat in Northern Virginia, right in the heart of Northern Virginia. And so the issue here is going to be money. He needs money. And, he was a little nervous there. Did you notice that, Rich? But he's actually a very good, decent man. If you met him also, you'd be incredibly impressed. A family man, 5 kids, wonderful wife. Just terrific. Hung Cao, he's challenging the reprobate Tim Kaine, who pretends he's moderate, but he's a radical leftist who votes with the radical leftists every step of the way. That's Hung, H-U-N-G, for VA.com. Any help would be appreciated for him. There's something here. Man, I'm running out of time. Nicholas Kristof has been a prominent inner thigh rash on the body politic for decades. And, of course, he's written for big newspapers. And therefore, Oliver Darcy, who is a low IQ, prepubescent reprobate, another guy, was a conservative, and now he's a hitman for the left. He does a slobbering interview of him because, you see, Nicholas has a new book coming out. And among other things, Nicholas is regurgitating something that I noticed and I wrote about in Unfreedom of the Press, although Nicholas probably thinks he's among the first to really lead this effort, and that is the corruption of the media. You see, ladies and gentlemen, Nicholas and his ilk, they think this way. It goes like this. Donald Trump is so Hitlerian. He's such a threat to America. He's such a threat to democracy. This MAGA crap, millions and millions of MAGA brown shirts, they're such a threat to our society that reporters must not stand on the sidelines and act like reporters. They must not seek impartiality. Not that they'd ever achieve it. They shouldn't seek it. They must not seek balance. Not that they ever actually achieve it, but they must not seek it. Their objective needs to be to save America. And the only way you save America is to take a side. So they talk about Joe McCarthy, George Wallace, and Jim Crow. I mean, you can't just report that. They talk about Martin Luther King and so forth. They can't just report that. Excuse me. George Wallace? Democrat? But what does that have to do with today? If you want to talk about George Wallace and Jim Crow, then you talk about Joe Biden. Because George Wallace praised Joe Biden and Joe Biden praised George Wallace. You want to talk about Jim Crow? There's only one candidate running who opposed public school integration. His name's Joe Biden. So what they do is what they always do. They twist history. They twist the facts. And they have to be partisan, radical, left-wing Democrats to save the country from us. The constitutionalists, those who believe in capitalism. They have to save the country from us. They all have to be Edward R. Murrow, don't you know? Or Walter Cronkite. And so Ollie, asked the question to Nicholas. This is like two lunatic left-wingers. One's interviewing the other. Journalists interviewing each other. Anything more monotonous? I'm just pointing out an issue. Why do you believe the institutions and so many journalists find it difficult to flatly state that Trump is anti-democratic candidate? These are journalists. Now, how's Trump an anti-democratic candidate? Biden defies 2 Supreme Court decisions. Biden defies immigration laws. Biden is impounding funds. They used to attack Nixon over that. Biden is the liar. What about that? Says, I have enough trouble defining and defending my own square foot of principle. I won't try to speak for other journalists. I must ask, the New York Times top editor Joe Kahn recently drew backlash for saying, to say that the threats of democracy are so great that the media is going to abandon its central role as a source of impartial information to help people vote, that's essentially saying that the news media should become a propaganda arm for a single candidate because we prefer that candidate's agenda. What do you make of Kahn's comments? They sound pretty good to me. I think people are reading too much, says Christoph, into a brief quote that can't encompass the complexity of running a newsroom today. Very complex. I've known Joe Kahn for 35 years. I admire and I believe his commitment to accountability journalism. In China and in America, we will periodically make mistakes, of course, but the Times is an amazing institution that takes very seriously its responsibilities to this country, to its democracy and its future. You know, this is amazing to me. The New York Times covered up the Holocaust. It wrote about it itself many decades later by a former managing editor, Max Frankel. I've spelled this out in my book, On Freedom of the Press. Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. He's president 4 years. He wasn't a threat to anything. He's a threat to them. The left, the Leviathan. He's a threat to the monopoly power of the Democrat Party, both served by the media, enslaved to the media. Donald Trump has done more to expose the media than any other human being in this country. He's praising a newspaper, a news corporation, a corporation that was a propagandist for Stalin in 1932 as he slaughtered 4, 5, 6 million Ukrainians, that helped cover up the Holocaust at the direction of Franklin Roosevelt, that helped install Fidel Castro in Cuba, and he calls it a great institution, and that he and his ilk, whether at the New York Times or the Post or elsewhere, they're going to protect America for democracy against Donald Trump, while Joe Biden's taking the side of Hamas and Iran and Hezbollah, violating Supreme Court orders, violating federal law, impounding funds? Seriously? Christoph, you are a fraud. You are a jackass. And Oliver Darcy, you're the gum on the bottom of my shoe. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Mr. Producer, do we have one caller, yes or no? WLS, Alexandra in Chicago. How may I help you? We've got 1 minute. How may I help you? Okay, what happened, Mr. Producer? It's almost too late. Levin app, Gettysburg, PA. Ron, real quick, how are you? Okay. This is a disaster, Mr. Producer. Are you there? Is anybody home? Okay, then we finish the show, Rich. And we figure out what our little technical problems are. I don't know how hard it is on a talk show to get a call, but apparently it's very difficult. So we'll have to really engineer this and figure this out. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, emergency personnel. We salute our truckers and the freedom fighters all over the world, in Ukraine, our brothers and sisters in Israel, and of course, red-blooded America. God bless each and every one of you, and I'll see you tomorrow.